Okay. So I'm Eddie Torres. I'm President and CEO of Grantmakers in the Arts. You have reached Move the Money, the Solidarity Economy discussion series. I'm so glad that you're here with us. We're really grateful to be able to spend this time together. I use he, him pronouns. I'm coming to you from the unceded land of the Lenape-Munsee people here in Queens, New York. For anyone who can't see me, I'm a cisgendered man with light brown skin and dark hair and eyes and a white beard. Please take a moment and introduce yourselves in the chat, letting us know your name, where you're coming from, your preferred pronouns, and on whose unceded land you're coming. Just wanted to establish some context for today's discussion and then hand it off to our speakers. Grantmakers in the Arts is working to complement the report that we commissioned, Solidarity Not Charity, Arts and Culture Grant Making in the Solidarity Economy, which was written by Natalia Linares and Caroline Woolard. And we're complementing that with discussions of real-world solidarity economy work to make tangible the points that Natalie and Caroline made in the report. Now, this is part of Grantmakers in the Arts work to complement our broadcast work with more hands-on, high-touch organizing work. Now, this discussion is part of a monthly series that will continue through April 2022, and I'll include in the chat a hyperlink to that registration process for folks who want to participate in the upcoming discussions. We have a series of groups coming up, and we're really grateful to be joined by such leaders in the field. I'm going to go ahead and hand this off to my colleague, Marina Lopez from Art.Coop. After Marina establishes some context, we're going to hand it off to Dr. Jessica Gordon-Nemhart to describe her work. And then we'll hand it off to Gregory Jackson to describe his work. And then we'll have an open discussion. So let me go ahead and stop sharing and hand it off to you, Marina.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Thank you so much, Eddie. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. My name is Marina Lopez. I use she, her pronouns. I am calling in from Wiyot land in far northern California. For those who can't see, I have olive skin and dark hair that's pulled away from my face. I've been co-organizing Art.Coop with Nati Linares and Caroline Woolard since August of 2021. Nati and Caroline, as Eddie mentioned, co-authored the report Solidarity Not Charity, Arts and Culture Grant Making in the Solidarity Economy, and that was published in March of 2021. Again, yes, we're here, the second of 5 in this series. We appreciate any of your feedback, and you can share with us in the chat or via email after the session, and we're excited to share this space with you over the next coming months. Today, we have really special guests, Professor Dr. Jessica Gordon-Nemhart and Gregory Jackson of Repaired Nations and the Sustainable Economies Law Center, and they'll be joining us to share about their work. Next month, we get to learn about 2 creative cooperatives leading the cultural economy we want, and you can sign up for this series at Art.Coop. Caroline will share some links in the chat with you. So Art.Coop exists to grow the solidarity economy movement by centering systems change work led by artists and culture bearers. As Nwako Agbo says, it is about community ownership and democratic governance for political, cultural, and economic power. So in other words, who owns and who decides? The Sustainable Economies Law Center, which Gregory Jackson is a part of, and you'll hear from him a little bit later, has this great prompt that I'd like for each of you to ask yourselves. How will you spread power and spread wealth and root it in hyperlocal communities? At Art.Coop, we spread power and wealth and root it in hyperlocal community when we connect cultural innovators across silos in the solidarity economy movement, when we amplify research and inspiration, resources and events that uplift this work, when we move money to multi-year, self-determined and systems change efforts that are led by artists, and when we study together in spaces like this hour to practice ways of spreading power and wealth and rooting it in community. So in our discussion series today, we're going to focus on study, because we study because most people have no experience with democratic decision making at home, at work, online, and even in schools. Study is required to ensure that a culture of cooperation and the skills of democratic governance are learned and then practiced daily. One of our guests, the incredibly influential scholar, Dr. Jessica Gordon Nemhard, states that nearly every African-American owned cooperative of the past that I have researched, and almost every contemporary cooperative I have studied, began as the result of a study group or deepened on proposive training and orientation of members. In most cases, Black-led cooperatives are an outgrowth of months and sometimes years of study of a vital problem. And indeed, a scan of the arts and culture landscape in 2021 reveals a growing demand for education and training about cooperative forms of enterprise. This and the next two slides are from a new report that's just out in December, commissioned by the Center for Cultural Innovation and led by Art.Coop organizer Caroline Willard. And if you want to learn a little bit more about the growing number of artist-led learning that's happening around the world, not just in this country, but globally, and the impact that cooperative structures can have on the distribution of wealth and equity in the arts and culture sector, I invite you to revisit this slide deck, which we'll share with you, and you can dive in a little bit more to the next two slides, which I will kind of skip past a little bit just for time's sake. So these are a couple that have some numbers that you can dive into. So when Nati and Caroline were interviewing over 100 people for the report, they heard about 4 major shifts that need to occur in grant making in order to support systems change towards racial and economic justice. Among them was internal work. So I'll share with you 5 pieces of internal work that they identified. One is getting data about inequities in your existing allocation of funding, setting internal and external benchmarks for practices of repair, engaging in embodied leadership training that addresses social position, rank, trauma, and race, learning about distributed leadership in nonprofits, including by shifting from a single executive director structure to a worker self-managed nonprofit, which our guest Gregory Jackson is a part of. And finally, by joining a peer network or a giving circle to support ongoing transformation. Both Dr. Gordon Nemhard and Gregory Jackson offer learning models to practice community governance for political, cultural, and economic power so that we can spread power and wealth and root it in community. Gregory Jackson's work with Repaired Nations supports youth and places unemployed and underemployed adults in apprenticeships within cooperatives and collectives in order to grow their capacity of local people and ecosystems to be self-sustaining and self-generating by centering worker experience into the core of the design of learning. And Dr. Jessica Gordon Nemhard reminds us that the history of BIPOC innovation in the cooperative movement has been erased and ignored and must be supported and lifted up so that we can learn from the past in the ongoing struggle for racial and economic justice today. And again, there can be no systems change without continuous co-mentorship, training, and study. Dr. Gordon Nemhard and Gregory Jackson have been leading the way in this area for a very long time, and their work offers culturally relevant learning for economic justice today. It is now my pleasure and honor to introduce to you and pass the mic on to Dr. Jessica Gordon-Nemhard, who will share with you about their incredible work that she's doing in the field and what she's developing so that you can all connect with it and support it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was a great introduction to all of this, and I appreciate so much the care and attention and love that's shown in this work that you all are doing. So thanks for having me. Let me share my screen. I'm trying to just give you a 10-minute overview of what I've been learning, what I know, and what I've been doing in terms of African American cooperatives and economic justice. I also want to do a land acknowledgement and acknowledge the original stewards of the land. I'm also on Lenape territory at the moment. I also love to acknowledge ancestors and bring my ancestors and our elders into the conversation and make sure that we remember them, remember the struggles of enslaved peoples, of people who continue to labor without just compensation, but also remember all the resistance activities and the strength that we bring and the legacies that we share and that we, I hope that we inspire for other people to use solidarity, economics, and cooperatives for liberation. And here we go. I always forget I have to click on it first. Just quickly, I think, hopefully, if you've all have read the report, you know what co-ops are, but I just wanted to put the slide up to remind us sort of what co-ops are, and then I'll talk about some of the benefits that I found through my research, especially to African American communities. But we know that they're democratic enterprises, right? They're equally owned and controlled. It's not just enough for the shared ownership and a membership structure, but the democratic piece of it. We know that co-ops, anchor, bring, and recirculate money, jobs, resources in their communities. We know that they're environmentally, economically sustainable and help us to address environmental and economic issues. We know that they're not charities, even though some co-ops are not for profit. Many and most of them, especially the worker co-ops, are for-profit enterprises. So it's not about just people throwing money at things, but also people creating resources, recirculating them, and sharing the power that comes with being in charge of your own resources. But co-ops also, are helped by grants and things like that. So it's not that they don't need the grants and things, but that they aren't themselves just a charity. And they're very resilient in good times and bad. They're part of an international movement, right? They change lives. And they're the more and more research we've done, we find that actually co-ops last longer than other small businesses, right? They have better longevity. They survive crises better. They often are even started in a crisis and help us get out of crises. So there's all those reasons why we believe and we talk about using cooperative economics as a strategy for both, not just for survival, but for liberation. In African American communities, we've got lots of evidence of cooperatives helping people to pool resources and anchor those local resources, to provide quality goods and services and access, especially when there are cultural and geographic barriers, right? And so creating your own co-op and working together with a co-op helps you to create more sensitive and appropriate goods and services for the needs of the community, right? So instead of being profit maximizing, it's about addressing needs, serving the community, and addressing the larger, right, the well-being of the larger group. Co-ops also save costs, help increase income, and are also wealth building, and we can talk about that more if you need to. They save and create decent jobs in communities. For Black communities, co-ops have also helped to increase economic stability, self-sufficiency, group independence, and self-determination, combating racial discrimination, and then also this developing of collective agency and action, right? Doing collective economics really helps to give people those tools to use their agency and to use collective action in all aspects of their lives. And that also helps to develop leadership and social capital. So co-ops, you'll see in some of my examples, it's not just that they're an economic strategy, but they're really a human and a social development strategy as well, and anchored, as we said, in communities. So quickly, I wanted to quote the late and great John Lewis. He talked about how by the late 60s, we sort of won the voting rights, but I hate to say that now while we're in a huge voting rights battle in the Senate at the moment. But he said, we finally got, right, we finally won the right to vote, but we still didn't have enough to eat. So voting wasn't enough. So I often talk about for racial justice, right, it's not enough to have civil rights and to get legal rights, but we need economic justice through economic democracy. So one of his early jobs before and when he first joined SNCC, the Student on National Coordinating Committee, he said he helped people to create cooperatives, right, to join together, to help them to fill, to address their needs. He showed people how to pool money to form a credit union, how to band together to buy groceries or feed or seed. In the arts world, we could talk about banding together to either buy materials together and supplies together, and or banding together to actually produce, market, and distribute your art. And so we've got lots of examples. I picked 3 art examples. They all turn out to be sewing, which I didn't really mean for that to happen, but the optics are pretty. So I thought that would be a nice slide to share to talk about the ways that co-ops have helped the artists and art communities. Freedom Quilting Bee in Alabama started in the 1960s, right? And not only did it allow and help sharecropping women to be able to make money from the quilting they did, mostly in the winter when they weren't sharecropping, right? But it also helped them to stabilize their incomes and their families. The co-op made enough money early on to buy land. They built a sewing factory, and then they actually moved from home production to actual factory production, right? That meant they needed to provide childcare and other children's services so that they could still do their work. And so you end up seeing the ways that a co-op helps to address a whole bunch of community issues. Also, the fact that they own land allowed them to help other sharecroppers to get out of sharecropping and that kind of thing. The Bantu Women's Cooperative in San Diego, similar. These are immigrant women who didn't have access to good jobs that could also address their needs for their family. So they were able to use a co-op for that. The Women's Textile Co-op in Minneapolis was helping to preserve Somali cultural art tradition, right? And again, being able to pool their resources, work together, own a joint space so that they could show their work, that kind of thing. Cooperatives have helped to do that. There's a co-op in Pittsburgh where the women are sole proprietors of their own art, but they share the space so that they have studio and a showing space, and they don't have to move around in pop-ups to sell their work. So you get the idea there. And then I just wanted to end with talking about a new project I'm working on, looking at worker-owned co-ops in prisons with incarcerated worker owners as the sole members. And my best example is a group in Puerto Rico, Cooperative Aragos, which began with art therapy in the Guayama Penitentiary in Puerto Rico, a men's prison. Very quickly, the men and their families got tired of just giving away their art and wanted to create a business model for what to do with their art. They demanded co-op education because they realized that a lot of their art was done collectively, and they wanted a collective business model for how to work together and how to sell it. Once they got their co-op training and they tried to incorporate as a cooperative, they found out that Puerto Rican law and most co-op law in the U.S. is state by state, not federal. The Puerto Rican co-op law, and I suspect a lot of other laws, didn't allow in prisons incarcerated people to run their own co-ops and to be on the board of their co-ops. So they actually met with the governor at the time. They then met with state assembly members, and they actually got the state assembly to change the co-op law so they could incorporate a co-op of all incarcerated owners. So a huge worldwide victory there. And then as their co-op worked, they would rephrase some of the principles. They had internal rules. They were able to create an MOU with the corrections department to even go out to co-op meetings to sell their work. And so they were very successful until COVID. And their prison was shut down during COVID, and they got scattered around Puerto Rico. And so we're not sure if they'll be able to start up again if and when we're out of these COVID crises. But for at least 10 years, they were very, very successful. They even allowed members who had very long sentences to reorganize themselves and to get their sentences commuted and to get out early. So this is one of their members, Roberto Rodriguez, that I want to end with a statement from him. Because he was able to, I think he had a 30 or 40-year sentence from the age of 19, and I think he served 11 years, and then for good behavior and for his work with the cooperative, he was able to get out early. And he talks about he never imagined that working in a cooperative, he would find his ideal model to rehabilitate himself, but he did. And so he attests that a program with a co-op model changes lives. We're not the same after we engage in the co-op. And I think that's an important, we know that these examples around the world that have co-ops within prison people, the recidivism rate for the people who get out who had been part of a co-op is much lower, and even behavior and other issues in the prison. And of course, they're able to make money for themselves and their families while in prison if they're a member owner of a worker cooperative. So it serves a lot of different issues spanning from the social, artistic and social to economic and criminal justice areas. So I'll end there, but I'm happy to talk to people about some of that research I'm doing and where that's going and what other kind of structures we can think of in the art world that would make these kinds of differences.
Dr. Gordon-Nemhart, that was amazing. I am so grateful that you shared that with us. I wanted to encourage people to feel free to ask questions or make remarks. And I'm going to abuse my privilege for a moment because I wanted to start by asking what more you're interested in doing or what you're interested in deepening as regards worker co-ops with incarcerated populations, and what the grantmaker community could do to be helpful as you do so.
Yeah, great question. Thanks. So the very first thing is the United States does not use this model, doesn't have it. So one of the things I'm trying to do is do the research to show the way the models have worked in other countries and to try to figure out what kinds of policies would be needed in the United States so that we could start doing this. There's certainly, I keep getting some emails from people who are starting to think about trying to do this. There was a group actually out of Philadelphia, one of Philadelphia's halfway houses, who had talked to me a couple of years ago before COVID about whether they could do a program, a 2-year halfway house program that did co-op education and help the women. This was a women's halfway house to start co-ops before they got fully out on parole. I hope they move forward with that. I don't know, but I also know that there are these state, right? A lot of the state and corporation laws need changing. Even Puerto Rico, they forgot when they changed it for incarcerated people to also change it for previously incarcerated. So they haven't been able to get co-ops going with previously, 100% previously incarcerated for a number of reasons. So there's a lot of policy stuff. There's a lot of education. We keep saying the theme here is education, right? Criminal justice systems, the prison systems, the funders don't really understand co-ops and all its potential. So the other piece is just trying to show how flexible the co-op model is and the variety of ways the co-op model has worked. And so we still need some research. We need more dissemination. I would love to think of some creative memes and graphic novels, comic strips, documentaries, or little short video clips, if we could get some money to put together to explain to people how this works, and then to talk to elected officials about law, right? Laws and policies that we need, so that we can do this in federal and in state prisons. I think those are kind of the biggest needs. So getting the information out, making sure we have good information, getting the information out, and then enough money to encourage the policy changes.
That's fantastic. That's so helpful. And it's so helpful too to see like that explicitly, the connection between, Art.Coop make this point all the time also, the connection between education and organizing and advocacy and policy change to actually create change in people's lives. That's perfectly articulated. Thank you. I want to, again, make a space in case anybody else has a question or a remark. The optics aren't going to work in terms of raising your hand, so please just unmute yourself.
Hi, Eddie, it's Diane Ragsdale. Can I jump in here?
Yes, please.
Dr. Gordon-Nembhard, thank you so much. This is such, and everyone, such a great presentation. The first chapter of your book, it was such a primer for me on cooperatives, and I'm so grateful for it. Like, it's something that I've been trying to track down and learn more about vis-a-vis the arts. One of the challenges, and you sort of hinted at it, that most cooperatives are for-profits, they're collectives, because the idea is collective ownership. A lot of arts organizations, and individual artists included, have really been drawn into the 501c3 nonprofit model. And so I've been curious about nonprofit cooperatives here and there, wondering if that might be a middle space that we have to head to first. I would be so interested in whether you think it, like, going there doesn't make sense, and it would be much better to just think about the collective ownership, for-profit model for the arts, or whether you see a hybrid being potentially more valuable in that space. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. I actually have a colleague who's trying to think about a what do you call it? A type B co-op. We have the new B Corps, but doing type B co-ops for just the reasons you're talking about. His name is Jerome Hughes, and I can put you guys in touch with him, I guess, through Eddie or Marina. If you want to talk to him more, he actually has something all written up about it and has been trying to figure out how to promote it. So that would help. The other thing I was going to say is what we've been doing in the co-op world right now is we do have either hybrids, right? Or we have like Cooperative Home Care Associates does this, and I guess Green Worker Cooperative sort of does it, where you have both a nonprofit and a for-profit. So for cooperative home care, which is not art, but it's home care, it's kind of the art of healing, right? And taking care of people. They have their for-profit worker co-op, but then they also have their nonprofit arm, which is a subsidiary of their for-profit, which does all the training. It does high-level training. In fact, it trains all their members, but it also does education, replicability, that kind of thing. So having that kind of combination, right? The corporations, for-profit corporations do that all the time, right? They have this kind of subsidiary and that. And I think we could think about that kind of model, so you could still have the ownership in the hands of the people who are really doing the work and who need the wealth building from it. But we could also have, a subsidiary that's a nonprofit that could also connect with all the philanthropy and beneficence and all that kind of stuff that we need in the area. So I would suggest that. The only other thing I was thinking of as you were talking, oh shoot, it just slipped my mind. I'll jump in later after Gregory goes if I think of the other piece. But yeah, there was something about that, the connecting, right? There's also these hybrid models of connecting stakeholders with producers, right? And figuring out, right, how to do that. So again, even a model where the individual artists are still sole proprietors, but they own a building or own something. Oh, that's what I was going to say, is the community land trust idea, which is a not-for-profit owned by a set of communities, right? Well, you could have a community land trust kind of idea for the ownership of the studio or the building or the store or whatever. So nobody owns that, but everybody still kind of owns their own art or something like that. So I think there are a variety of ways that we, again, the flexibility, once we think about it, and Gregory's Sustainable Economies law firm, they're great at thinking about these flexibilities of how you can do different co-op ownership structures. that make sense for what you're trying to do.
Thank you so much. That was such an extraordinary answer. And yes, I've been stalking the Sustainable Economies Law Center online for a couple of years now. So thank you so much for that really great response.
Yeah, and I saw a comment in the chat about a comic book or something, and I'm actually working on a graphic novel. I should have added that to what I'm doing. I'm working on a graphic novel version of my book, Collective Courage, and I actually could use some funding for that. I'm hiring a new illustrator. I had 35 of the 120 pages illustrated and then lost that illustrator. And so I'm starting from scratch. So anyway, you can talk to me about that also, but it's part of my new thing about how to make all this information much more accessible to wider audiences.
Fantastic. Any further questions or remarks? Okay. Dr. Gordon Nemhart is sticking around with us to the end, so even after Gregory's presentation, if you have further questions or remarks, please feel free to bring them. Dr. Gordon Nemhart, thank you so much. I'm going to ask Gregory to join us, and feel free to share your screen as well.
Greetings, everybody. Glad to be here and to be sharing space with Dr. Gordon Nemhart. Kind of been following what's in her book for the past 5 years and doing my best to, I guess, bring some of that essence, which is in the book, into Oakland, as well as like integrating with what is already there. I will start off with this quote by Adrienne Marie Brown at the top of the presentation. As Tony K. Bombara has taught us, we must make just and liberated futures irresistible. We are all the protagonists of what might be called the great turning, the change, the new economy, the new world. I'm going to start with that quote because late 2017, I was trying to figure out what to do with my life after law school and going to SDSU. And I really wanted to do something that didn't contribute to the mess I saw around me. It feels much more messy now than it did then. But what I came to after doing research at Sustainable Economies Law Center as an intern and learning about what was going on in Italy with the Marcora law, in Spain with the Mondragon Corporation, I really felt like if there was some kind of concerted effort to get Black folks around like collectivism, that we'd be able to like advance a lot. I read Collective Courage shortly after that, and like things have begun from there. I'll be sharing snippets from our Repaired Nations annual report from last year. I've been on sabbatical and haven't gotten around to doing one, or I'm sorry, 2 years ago, 2020, I haven't gotten around to doing one for 2021 yet. Repaired Nations was like initially set up because of the like invisible barriers of non-cooperation that Dr. Gordon Nemhart like mentioned briefly. And what we really wanted to do was find out like how to be what's talked about at the top of the page, like living potentiality, and inspiring a sense of possibility among like ourselves and others. And so we've gradually grown into a Pan-African network of support and resources that catalyzes the growth of cooperatives, focused specifically on East Oakland, but also with this Pan-African networking focus. And in 2020, some of the major activities that we are up to, which are continuing into 2022, are Collective Courage book clubs, which all start at the top of the year. Before the pandemic, we did these in person, gathered folks to read a chapter a month and learn about Collective Courage and the ways that our ancestors like use cooperatives to like further themselves and our community. They've shifted online. For the past 2 years, we've done them on Instagram Live. and we've gotten in like a bunch of co-hosts, and we've also piloted an eSusu savings circle for some of the participants so that they can like reach towards their goals. It also helps raise credit scores, which has been awesome. We have a Pan-African Solidarity Economy Conference, which I think is coming into its 4th year this year. First started off by going to Ghana during the year of return and making connections, seeking to start conversations so that, you know, we can know folks over there before wanting to like do like repatriation or any other kind of cooperative effort there. That's always been like a major focus of ours. Initially, our vision was like creating a retreat center in Kenya. Still working towards that, but Wakanda has been like one of those next steps. This is a burgeoning cooperative, a multi-stakeholder cooperative that is seeking to gather artists and culture bearers into a common organization so that we can hold down space, preferably in East Oakland, and be able to have that launch pad where both existing and new ventures can thrive. Over the past year, last year, Wakanda spent a lot of time doing its bylaws, going out to public events, outdoor events, and sharing what we've been up to and inviting folks to get involved, as well as always having art and culture like weave through everything. Most recently, we joined the Seed Commons, which is a national financial network of technical assistance providers that support cooperatives on the ground in their communities, as well as providing access to a shared pool of funds that's non-extractive. We have been, since we've entered in, we've been spending a lot of time getting folks loan ready, helping them understand the back-end stuff that they need to do, whether it's a business model canvas, a business plan, financial projections, or any of those sorts of things. And so fingers crossed, we're anticipating that we'll be getting our first loan through this year. This is a clip.
The Black Co-ops that we'll be hearing from.
This is a clip of the conference, which happened the first week of November last year. I'll play about 45 seconds so you all can get a taste of what it's like and what you could view if you'd like to go on to Repatriation's YouTube and see more.
Today include Mandela Grocery Co-op, one of my absolute favorite co-ops, near and dear to my heart. The Deep Rich City Rides, Okanda, Cooperation Jackson, and Cooperation Dayton.
Hello, my name is Andrea, and I'm here representing Mandela Grocery Cooperative.
Hi, I'm A. Krishna Cox with Wakanda.
And I'm Carolina Morones. I'm also with Wakanda.
My name is Najari Smith. I'm the one of the co-owners of the worker-owned cooperative, Rich City Rides Bike Shop in Richmond.
Greetings, my name is Mikhail. I'm a worker owner at Mandela.
I guess that was the little segment that I chose to share. But what you'll find when you go into the YouTube is a conversation from cooperatives and collectives across the US and across the diaspora about like how they formed, what got them interested in starting a co-op, and how it's been going since the pandemic. Very interesting stuff. I hope you're able to check it out. So some of the projects that we support, or most of the projects we support actually, are very like arts and culture based. The first one on the list here is Authentic African, which has been, there were several attendees that came to Ghana and started this business shortly afterwards, outfitting sweats with adinkra or kente cloth. Very awesome. I should have been wearing some, but you can check them out, and they often are selling here in East Oakland. The Deep, Grocery Cooperative, or formerly East Oakland Grocery Co-op, was an initiative that Repair Nations was a part of with Mandela Grocery and Acta Non Verba, supporting the creation of this co-op with youth and young adults in East Oakland shortly after all of us were involved in a community planning session called, shoot, I'm forgetting the name, but it was the first community planning done in East Oakland for close to 30 years. And one of the objectives that the community said they wanted was more cooperatives, namely grocery stores and land trusts. Ross Oak Collective is a collective just starting out that features art, healthy food, and movement they meet at Lake Merritt, and they do that often. They also deliver alkaline water and food. It's really amazing. The Bay Area Empowerment Cooperative has been doing a incubator program similar to Repair Nations, and it's called Return to Black Wall Street. It's really awesome. NEX Means is a music collective that has been doing the Fluid Virtual Open Mic for several years. They've gotten nominated for the Best of the Bay a couple of times, and yeah, we've been supporting them and understanding how to operate as a collective in the art space, with like trying to get grants as well as find sustainable like pricing or what have you. Holistic Underground was another program that we supported where let's see, Holistic Underground, all this stuff is a little fuzzy, sorry. Holistic Underground did a program called Alter, where they gathered about 10 to 15 Black artists and culture barriers in Oakland to help them gain the personal skills necessary to advance. And so that included how to manage your time, how to get over this thing they call monkey mind when you're approaching your goal, but you start kind of veer off track, and several other things that are still helpful. Currently, Repair Nations is structured in this committee form. We're going to be changing a little bit, moving into our own entity rather than a fiscally sponsored project. But we have the leadership committee that pretty much handles the day-to-day things and all of these other places where we're doing our work. Most recently, I'll finish with this, we started a work-based learning program funded by the Stupski Foundation, which we've been able to gather 9 to 12 people per year, place them in apprenticeships, help them develop their cooperatives hands-on, as well as helping with the personal navigation aspects. And so some of the co-ops that were a part of the development track that we call the work-based learning program were the Deep, continuing their receiving support from us, as well as a record shop, which was really awesome, or a record label, I should say. And so, yeah, I mein, it's been awesome. I think I'm close to time, but over the past 5 years, like, people have been gaining interest in cooperatives and really trying to figure out like how to do that. I mean, you can really see the difference here in East Oakland. I've mentioned Wakanda, and I'm seeking to collectively own a building. The Black Cultural Zone has been negotiating with the city. They already have a long-term lease for what's called Liberation Park, where there are tons of events and a farmer's market. But they're also entering into an exclusive negotiating period, or negotiating to get into. I'm not quite sure where they're at, but they're going to be developing this parcel soon, and need support. Legacy of Black Genius was a cooperative collective that we started supporting last year. They started doing COVID-safe edutainment and dinner. I think the first event was a return to the 20s, and they hired artists to impersonate people from that area while giving performances and serving dinner. And so I think you could have bumped into Marcus Garvey or Ella Jo Baker, or I think Josephine was also there. It was awesome, and I heard good things about it. I think lastly, I'll mention Divine Minds Think Aligned, another artist incubator program that we've been supporting pretty much since the beginning. They were part of the initial cohort collective, the Kokosi collective, that we started in 2018 when we first began this, wanting to, well, the initial goal was to start an arts collective from that group, but they all decided to deepen their work with Repaired Nations instead and built this. So we've kind of been going at it hand in hand, but Divine Minds Think Aligned, they just won an awesome grant from, I believe, Akanadi. They also are a Zoo Labs alumni. They're doing a Black women's focus arts accelerator program, which I know is going to be awesome, and I hope you all can check it out. I think I'm complete.
Greg, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. And both you and Dr. Gordon Nemhart are astonishingly prompt. We do this kind of thing all the time at Grantmakers in the Arts, and I never see anybody that actually finishes on time. So you are both innovators in this way, among others. I just wanted to, again, open it up for remarks and questions. I'm going to, again, abuse facilitator privilege by my opening by asking you about the folks who have been supportive. You know, you've mentioned Akanadi supporting Divine Minds and some of the other things that are being supported. And I wanted to get a sense from you, one, sort of in the spirit of who has been supportive, but also maybe more importantly, you know, what kinds of support have been helpful in terms of those who've been supportive? What are you seeing in common that is actually useful and that you'd like to see more of?
I think one thing that has been extremely helpful is long-term funding guaranteed, because the Hewlett Foundation was able to do that through a staff-directed granting process that they piloted. We've been able to receive funding for, well, it was years when we received it. I think we still have 3 left. And that's relieved a lot of pressure from me. I think, well, I'm not sure how you all feel on the other side of it, but oh my Jesus, like worrying about money like constantly is, that's one of the reasons why I started this because I don't want to focus on the money. But however, I'm like the lead steward, as we call it at Repair Nations, and so it's kind of my responsibility to make sure that the folks we bring on like can continue and like we don't have to lay anyone off. So that's been extremely helpful. And I think how the San Francisco Foundation has operated the past couple of years has been also helpful, where there was an initial granting phase or a grant application, and they decided, I think after the first year or midway through, that they were going to also kind of focus on a core group of people or a core group of organizations and continue funding them. Well, they've given us, I think, a second or third year. And that's also been supportive because, yeah, I think part of the job that I have when applying for grants is explaining what a co-op is, as well as explaining why it's important that you fund it. And I don't know, I'm learning as I go. I think I'm okay at it, but those 2 things for sure have been helpful.
Well, we host these capitalization workshops that are led by somebody who comes out of nonprofit finance fund. You know, so there's no chair throwing radical or anything. And she was talking about the importance of long-term guaranteed support. And one workshop participant said, well, you know, the organizations just have to keep raising money. I mean, that's their job, right? And our consultant said, no, it's actually their job is actually to fulfill their missions. Financing them is your job. So it was great to hear that from somebody who was coming from a fairly conventional place. Let me open this up in case anybody would like to unmute themselves and ask any questions of Greg, or if anybody wants to ask any questions of Dr. Gordon Nemhart that they just didn't get to before.
Well, Eddie, since you named Nonprofit Finance Fund, and that's where I'm from, I feel like, great, this is a good time to jump in with my question, which is not at all finance related. It's actually about how work really happens within co-ops. And I'm curious from both presenters if you could kind of opine on, you know, democracy is messy. So who are the people? What are the qualities? What are like the roles and responsibilities that really make the co-ops run? Like, does someone need to be responsible for calling the meeting so that votes can happen? Would love to just hear about like some of the people structure.
Okay. Dr. Gordon Nemhart, my instinct is to defer to you, but I'll go first because I didn't see you on mute. I think that okay, co-ops are very people dependent, very, very people dependent. And so if there's a group of OCD type folks who like want everything scheduled and they gotta know because they gotta know, that's how the co-op's gonna work. But if the co-op is full of more free flowing, like, you know, they'll come to the meeting when they come, they're not trying to get there 30 minutes late, there was just this thing, that's how the co-op's gonna run, okay? I think that like practically it's very important to have like someone in charge of like facilitating the meeting, making sure the notes are taken, helping track like next actions and ensuring that, you know, the person who volunteered or is doing a certain thing is doing it or seeing if they need help. I think another thing that's like very important for co-ops is communication, like early communication. And so like, no matter how like good the chemistry is within a co-op, like there are just some things where it's like, if you tell someone last minute or like if you just don't tell someone at all, it's probably not gonna be something people enjoy or it's just gonna, yeah. So how do I say? Early communication because like it's all like co-ops can be quite people-centered. And we're also like, I guess, balancing this thing of doing the work while, or like making sure the work is done while also asking and making sure folks are self-directed. And so I don't know if that feels contradictory. It does at times, like being in my position where like I feel like I know what the answer is and I can make a suggestion, but ultimately it's up to the group or up to the people who are responsible to like fulfill something. I'm gonna pass it over to Dr. Nemhart. Gordon Nemhart.
Yeah, I'm glad you went first because you gave a great answer. You know, I'm more of an academic, so I'm going to give more of an academic answer. The first thing I want to say is a lot of people think that democratic governance and co-ownership and collectivism means anarchy, or maybe I shouldn't say anarchy, but means like everyone just gets to do whatever they want and there's no organization or whatever. Well, that's wrong. And in fact, in my studies, the co-ops that were better organized did better, lasted longer, right? But organization doesn't have to be hierarchical, right? It doesn't have to be, you know, you don't have to have set managers, but you do have to, you know, and joint decision making means you agree on which kinds of decisions are made by which group of people, right? And then groups of people make decisions. So you would definitely have a group, right, who were organizing the meetings, right, making sure, right, most of the co-ops that I know that really operate the best, they have agendas set way ahead of time. And in fact, sometimes they're a little bit rigid because you can't, you know, change the agenda the day before the meeting. You know, you have to ask to add things to the agenda, but they do that because, right, it takes organization to help facilitate people making decisions together, right? So that, I think, is one of the most important things that we don't think about, but that really make a co-op run, right? Co-ops are businesses. They're people-centered, values-centered businesses, but they're still businesses. So you have to have smooth operations, good communication, early communication, but you can do that by agreeing on which groups of people, which committees, which people do it, right? Some co-ops, they switch the responsibility, right? Every 6 months, they change who's responsible, or it's a committee, but committee members can change, or people on the committee who make which decision can change. But the point is that everyone has decided on these processes together, and know and expect that they're going to work and have to be accountable to them. So I don't know if that answered your question. We don't have a lot of time. I could go a whole lot more into governance, but I think I made the point.
No, that's super helpful. Thank you to you both.
Fantastic. And we have two more questions, and then we're going to wrap up. We have Keela and then Joan.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So my name is Kiela Smith-Upton. I'm out of Chicago and co-founder and project manager with Artists Design the Future. And we're looking to form as a cooperative, ideally a worker cooperative, to do mixed-use real estate development for artists in Chicago, which is, needless to say, a unicorn on a lot of levels in Chicago. And just, when people think real estate, they just think maximum profit, and it's really a challenge. So what Gregory mentioned about, we're here to do the work, or whoever that was that said that. And I, just being the project manager and co-founder, really focused on doing a lot of the applying for money. It gets very emotionally and physically and mentally exhausting, because I feel like we're climbing up mountains that maybe were traversed before, but that really the philanthropic community doesn't have enough knowledge and education around the type of ventures and ways in which we're trying to create equity in our communities. And the constant denials we've been getting, I had to take just a break, and then COVID caught me, so I'm getting back up. But it is really challenging. And so I guess I'm just sharing that with you, Mr. Torres, to just say to your question, I think that's a piece that could really help if we can get greater education into the philanthropic community.
Thank you for that. I completely agree. And I hope this is the beginning of that process, along with Caroline Nutty's reports and these kinds of discussions. So thank you for that, Kayla. And I apologize for having mispronounced your name also. Joan, let me ask you to ask the last question, and then I'm going to hand it off to Gregory and Dr. Gordon-Nembhard to give us their closing reflections.
Thanks so much, Eddie, and thank you to both of you. Very enlightening presentations. My question is simple. I'm curious if either of you has examples you could cite or that you have found in the course of your research and perambulations through the communities of cooperatives such as you have presented happening in the performing arts. So music, dance, theater, which many of us focus on in our philanthropic support. I'm aware of some very small scale cooperative efforts, but not really in alignment with everything you have presented. In the visual arts, in crafts, in food, etc.
So performing arts, not a lot, but there is, I believe, an orchestra in Boston and one in London that are co-ops and run as co-ops. I was actually just reminded of my friends at Falcon Works in Brooklyn. They actually created a play based on my book just before COVID, I think in 2019. But they're an active collective theater troupe in Brooklyn. And I think there's a bunch of similar ones around the country. Maybe I shouldn't say a bunch. I think there are a couple of other similar sort of theater collectives, but I know more about Falcon Works than the others. So it's possible, again, I can't reiterate enough how flexible the co-op solidarity economics collective model is. There's lots of different ways to do this kind of co-ownership. The biggest issue is to do it based on values, democratic participation, equity, shared distribution, right? So using the values and the principles of cooperation and mutual aid, that's what's important. The structures, there's lots of flexibility in how you actually structure it.
Thank you.
Great. We are at time, but let me ask you if you have anything that you want to make sure that people take away with them from this conversation. Greg and Dr. Gordon Emhart.
Greg, you want to go first?
Co-ops are the future. We're the protagonists of that future.
You know, the funny thing is I was about to say something similar, not quite as eloquently as you just said it. But yeah, that we should make sure we realize this is the future, right? This is how we can make it to a future, right? If you think about all the challenges in the world right now, not just COVID, right? We have challenges of wealth inequality, we have challenges of climate change and environmental sustainability, but the co-op model, the mutual aid, solidarity economics, collective ownership, collective decision making, that model is the model that's going to get us, if we have a future, that model is going to get us to that future, because we really can't sustain ourselves with the current paradigm and the current model of economics and economic development. So we really need to think about, if we care about the future, then we have to care about this model, and we have to make sure this model not just exists, but persists and proliferates.
Thank you so much, Greg, Dr. Gordon Emhart. For everybody who's here, we're going to be sharing their presentations. We've recorded this. I'm going to share the chat. Make sure that you have contact information. This has been really, really fantastic. It's both been educational and really inspiring, and I'm really grateful that you spent this time with us today. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. It's been a pleasure.
I also want to say a great big thank you to the folks at Art.Coop, Caroline Woolard, Natalia Linares, Marina Lopez. Thank you so much. And to everybody, Happy New Year. Looking forward to seeing you next month.